You're listening to the Life Purpose Advisor Podcast, episode 46.
It's time to go when you have too much self-respect to stay. So many people right now are in jobs where they don't feel like they're appreciated. Maybe they're even, not treated well at work. They're overlooked, undervalued, and I just don't think it's worth staying.
You're listening to the Life Purpose Advisor Podcast.
Life purpose, spirituality, higher calling, personal growth, meaningful life.
We ask the deep questions about living a balanced life of meaning, purpose, and joy.
Passion, know thyself, be mindful, spiritual practice, aha moments, life lessons, balance.
It is time to welcome your host, Angie Swartz.
Hello and welcome. This is Angie Swartz, and I'm so glad that you've joined us. You can find many of the things that we referenced today in the show notes for this show at lifepurposeadvisor.com/46. That's lifepurposeadvisor.com/46. Every day I work with people to help them find their life purpose. If you are interested in finding your life purpose and in learning more about this work, please email me directly at Angie@lifepurposeadvisor.com for more information. My guest today has a new book that many of you are going to want to order right now. I saw Tess Vigeland speak last month in Portland, and I couldn't wait to invite her to join us. Tess Vigeland is a well-known voice to millions of American radio listeners. She spent 11 years as an anchor for public radio's Marketplace, including 6 years hosting the personal finance show Marketplace Money. Tess can be heard as a backup anchor for NPR's All Things Considered, as well as KCRW's To the Point and KPC's Take Two in Los Angeles. Tess also writes for the New York Times and The Guardian, and among numerous other publications. Her first book, titled, and this is my favorite thing we're going to talk about today, Leap Without a Net, Leaving a Job with No Plan B, has just been released on August 25th. As you can imagine, I'm very excited to speak with her about this today and to hear her thoughts about finding life purpose. Tess, welcome so much to the show.
Thank you, Angie. It's a pleasure to be here.
I couldn't be more excited, as you can probably tell from my introduction.
What, do you want to quit your job?
Well, I already have.
Good for you.
So, and as you'll see as we go through the questions, it's something I'm very interested in, everyone's thoughts on whether or not, let's just get right to it. Do you think that someone should quit their job if they're having an urge to do something different?
Yes, with the right planning, absolutely. And I will also tell you that just before the book went to print, we decided to change the title to Leap and drop the without a net part, because you do have to plan. I don't think that you have to have a fully formed plan B for what you're going to do next and what you want to do with the rest of your life. But when I thought about, should I really be telling people to leap without a net, I thought, some people are going to take that a little too literally and up and quit their jobs with no savings and nothing at all. So I encourage people to leap with a bit of planning, but that doesn't mean that you have to have it all figured out before you do it.
And how about you? I know a little bit about your story, but have you leaped?
Yes.
Left?
Yes. I spent 22 years in public radio. 11 of those with Marketplace, the show that you just mentioned. It's a business and economics show heard on public radio stations nationwide. And 3 years ago, I quit. I basically, for a couple of reasons, I had some issues with a few things in my workplace. And I was kind of tired of the subject matter I was covering, business and economics. I wanted to do something different, but I just didn't know what that was. I had no idea if I wanted to go do something completely different or if I wanted to stay in radio, if I wanted to stay in journalism. So I gave 3 months notice, and then I left, and I had nothing else lined up. Now, I'm fortunate that I was in an occupation where I could pretty much go into business for myself as a freelancer, and that's what I did for a while. And then most of the last couple of years has been taken up with writing the book. So I definitely took a leap, and I leaped into something sort of different, but not really. I mean, book writing is, especially nonfiction writing, is still kind of journalism. So I haven't really leaped into something entirely new, like an entirely new career path.
Let's just talk about what you said about you changed into something that you were already doing. And let's talk about platform, which is a big conversation that everyone's having today. But just as a little bit of insurance for your words that you've already given about leaping to something new, if you're an insurance broker and you're working in the finance business and you think that you're going to leap and do something like what you've done, it's not as easy, right?
It isn't, because you have a certain set of skills within an industry. But one thing that I do talk about in the book, and that I tell people when they're saying, oh, I can't go do something else because this is all I know, is that a lot of us, especially if you've been doing one thing for a long time, maybe 5 years, 10 years or more, there are things you do in your job that you consider kind of part of your DNA. You don't even think of them as skills because it just comes so naturally to you. You don't think of them as marketable because they're simply part of what you do on a regular basis. It's the things that you say to yourself, oh, I could do that in my sleep at work. But when you step outside of your industry, when you step outside of what you do every day, there are probably ways that you can take those skills and transfer them somewhere else. We just don't really take the time to think about that sort of thing. So one thing I really encourage people to do is to sit down and really go through what you do on a daily basis that maybe you don't even think of as a skill. For me, it was public speaking. I had been doing that for 20 plus years, on the air, in front of audiences. It was just something that I did, and I don't have stage fright. I know how to use a microphone. I have no problem getting up in front of 3,000 people. It's not a big deal to me. But for most people, getting up in front of an audience and talking is the most terrifying thing they could possibly imagine. So I never thought of that as a skill that I could translate into something other than what I did on the radio. But it took someone from outside asking me if I would come in and do a corporate emceeing gig, where all of a sudden I was like, oh, I can get paid to do this. I didn't even think of it as a skill that I had. And I think we all have those sorts of things. You just have to kind of step outside of what you do on a daily basis and really think about what that might be for you.
Tell us about some of the other things, the other pearls of wisdom that are in the chapters in the book.
Oh, they're in every chapter.
I'm sure. Every sentence, right?
Every sentence is a pearl of wisdom. Oh, no, right. And what I will tell people is that this is not a how-to book. This is not a how-to-quit-your-job book. I can't tell people how to do it. What I've done in the book is describe what the process is like, because I think it goes beyond just the financial aspect of it. It also has to do with figuring out who you are outside of what you do. I had an identity crisis when I left because I had been doing one thing for more than 2 decades, and all of a sudden I didn't do it, and I was like, am I valuable anymore? Why does anyone care what I do now? And you to go through that process, and that takes up a lot of the book, both my story and the stories of other people who have quit their jobs without knowing what they wanted to do next. It's really all the process, the mental process, the emotional process that you go through when you do something like this, because I don't think that anyone will tell you what to do and how to do it. That said, the biggest question, the most common question I always get is, how do I know when it's time to go? People maybe have this feeling, this itch, but they're not sure if it's the right time. And I do have 3 things that I encourage people to look out for. First of all, it's time to go when you have too much self-respect to stay. So many people right now are in jobs where they don't feel like they're appreciated. Maybe they're even, not treated well at work, where they feel like they're overlooked, undervalued. And I just don't think it's worth staying in a situation like that. Life is way too short to spend 8 or more hours a day doing something for people who don't appreciate you. It's not worth it. So if you are not getting from your employer what you feel you deserve, what you feel you need, especially in terms of respect, it's time to go. It just is. The second thing is if you start to have some physical manifestation of your stress at work. For me, my hair stopped growing. This is a true story. I was so stressed out that my hair stopped growing. Now, it wasn't that it was falling out, but, you lose hair every day and it just replenishes. Mine stopped growing. So all of a sudden, this beautiful blonde head of hair that I had was straggly and thin, and I was like, what is going on with me? This was a manifestation of stress. For other people I talked to for the book, it was mysterious backaches, and they'd never had them before, or migraines, and they'd never had them before. You have to pay attention to what your body is telling you. It will scream at you, and you have to pay attention. So just ignore it and just keep going because they think they have to. And third, if you are asking yourself the question, how will I know when it's no? It's past time to go, or at least to start thinking about it. You are even starting to say, it's Monday tomorrow, and I don't want to go in, and I don't know why, and I just can't take this anymore. Or even if you feel like you love your job, which is how I felt, I still loved my job, but there was something that was just tugging at me, and I kept ignoring it. And I kept asking myself, well, how will I know? How will I know when I have to go? And I wish I had paid attention sooner, and I didn't. So if you're asking yourself the question, you've got to start thinking about it. You've got to start sitting down. If you're a list person like me, you've got to start making pro and con lists. You've got to start thinking about how you're going to manage it financially. Again, my argument in the book is that you don't have to figure out what that next step is, whether you're going to stay in your profession or you're going to completely change your life and go do something entirely different. You don't have to figure that out right away. I think it's good if you take a break to think about that while you are not working somewhere else. That said, you do have to prepare yourself psychologically and financially.
Let's just talk about that for a moment, because I always advise the same thing. People want to figure out their next step. They want to know before they make a decision to quit their job. That's the natural thing to want to do. But in fact, as you were saying, our hair is falling out, or our hair's not growing, or our back's aching, or we're having migraines, or we're very stressed out. We're not at the right mental capacity to be thinking about the next step in our lives. So we need to make some room for some creative thought to come back into our lives about where we're going.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you talk about that.
Yeah, it really is. I think when you are still in the job that you think you might want to leave, it's just very difficult to open your mind to what other possibilities might be out there for you. Because you're
still in your old patterns,
you're in your old
right?
patterns. You're still in your workaday life. You have a schedule that you're keeping. If you have a family, then that's a complication as well. There's just not kind of room in your head to really open up to the possibilities. And so I think that while it is difficult to do, it's very difficult to get yourself to the point where you are taking some time, where you are not in a workaday job. It feels weird because we're not supposed to do that, and we're all supposed to have a plan. We're supposed to have the 2-year plan, the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, and if you don't, it just feels weird. That said, when you sit with yourself, when you sit with this decision, when you sit with this uncertainty for some amount of time, maybe not as long as I have, but for some amount of time, it allows you to get outside of your own expectations And I think that is what holds people back so much, is the expectations that they have of themselves and what their life is supposed to look like, and what they think other people are going to think of them. You know, if they up and leave a job, or if they up and leave a career, you know, it's so inculcated with this idea that a career is supposed to look like X, Y, and Z, that when we start to imagine maybe doing that, it rings false to us, because that's not what we've heard our entire life. And I guess I'm advocating for it's a different way of thinking about how you want to conduct your life.
Well, as evidenced by what you said about having a big identity crisis,
yeah.
I've talked to many people about this topic as well. I left my job in 2003, so it's been a while. But how many people have you spoken to that experienced that same thing about a big identity crisis when they left their jobs?
Most people do. Because although there are plenty of 20-somethings who have taken their own leaps, at least that's what they would call them, and I don't know how old you are. I'm 46. You know, when you're in your 20s, you kind of expect to do that. And particularly the millennials these days, they are going from job to job, and it doesn't even faze them. And it's just kind of what they do now. But for those of us who grew up, you know, maybe in the 80s and 90s, where even in the 2000s, where there's still this notion of what your career is supposed to look like, it's very hard to wrap your mind around doing something a different way, and you feel bad about it. You feel like there's something wrong with you, like maybe you're crazy.
Well, and you've been working so long, and I'm in the same age group as you. You know, we've been working so long towards this goal or this idea in your mind of where you were headed.
Right.
And then you decide to change tracks or change lanes. And okay, well, I was just kidding. I'm not really going there. I'm going someplace else now. All those hard years of education and overtime hours and, you know, sucking up to someone that I didn't really want to. Not that any of us do that, but, and what was that for? Why was I doing all those things?
Yeah, you know, I talk about this in the book, and it's akin to something in finance. It's called the sunk cost theory. Are you familiar with this? Yeah. So
Absolutely.
This is where, at least in finance, this is when you are holding on to a stock, even though it's looking like it's either going to tank or you're going to lose money. You keep holding on to it because you've been holding it for so long. You've been putting money into it maybe for 10 years, and you keep holding on to it against your best interest just because you feel like you've sunk so much into it. You've sunk so much into that against all of them, as the stock is starting to decline, you hold it thinking that it's going to get better.
What a great analogy.
Yeah, well,
here I am. I've invested this much in my unhappiness.
Exactly.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, I've invested so much in my career. I studied to get here. I took classes, you know, extra classes along the way so I get really good at it. I've spent 20 years getting all these skills and all this experience, and I can't just leave that by the wayside. That would be stupid. But it's not. And my argument is, first of all, that the sunk cost theory in stocks shows that it's not wise to do that, because all you're going to do is lose money if you don't get out of that stock. And what you're going to lose in your life if you don't get out of a situation, a career that isn't bringing you some element of joy, you're going to lose even more than money. You're going to lose a piece of yourself. And it's just not worth it. And you also have to bear in mind that all of that experience, all of those skills that you've garnered over those 10 years, 20 years, maybe 30 years for some of the baby boomers out there, it doesn't just disappear. You'll find ways to use those skills in whatever you do next. It may not be obvious to you now, but you will find a way. And they make you valuable in ways that you may not even recognize at this point. And I would also say that even if that doesn't happen, if you have been a journalist for 20 years and you decide you want to go be a truck driver, a long-haul truck driver, and it requires you to learn totally new skills, have an entirely different lifestyle, that's an adventure.
You'll grow.
You'll grow. And that doesn't mean that the 20 years you spent doing something else were worthless. It was just a part of your life. It was a part of your story. It was a part of your adventure. And you can keep that for yourself as something that was valuable to you. And leaving it behind doesn't mean that you didn't love it. It doesn't mean that it was worthless. It means that it was just part of your story. And you're moving on from that.
It might even mean that the next chapter after that is that you're going to marry those two skills and write a best-selling book about
long-haul trucking.
Or on the road too, or something like
right.
that. Or a video series, or writing from the back of the bed of the truck,
yeah.
or whatever those things are.
And what it gets to is really, again, it's this whole notion that your career is supposed to look like XYZ. And that's been just banged into our heads for decades. And it's not true. You have one time on this earth. You have one life on this earth. And making your career look like what it's supposed to look like, what everybody else tells you it's supposed to look like, is a waste of time. You need to do what's best for you, what's going to bring you some element of joy in your life.
Joy. It's always amazing to me how many people can't answer the question, what brings them joy? And they don't think about it.
Yeah, I've been fortunate that I haven't struggled with that. My job actually for 20 years, for the most part, brought me joy. And it was mostly because I got to interview people for a living. And there's nothing I like more than talking to people, including right now.
I would agree with that.
This is like my favorite thing to do. And so I got to do it, and people paid me to do it, and I got to share that with people on the national airwaves. But, if you are having trouble finding that element of joy, then it's really, really time to sit down and ask some hard questions, because you've got to have that in your life. You cannot go through your 60 years, your 70 years, your 90 years, your 105 years, hopefully, and not have that. That's not what we're here for. And, this is the point where I do have to say, look, there are certain elements of society. If you are a family of 4 struggling to make ends meet at $30,000 a year, $40,000 a year, you can't do this. And I understand that. And you can't just pick up and go. There are other factors that come into play, and I would never encourage anyone to do that, without the kind of financial wherewithal to do so. And so, this whole idea of leaping does speak to, I suppose, an element of privilege, and I want to acknowledge that up front.
I watched a video that you did on some work that you did here, and I'm in San Diego, that you did here on the poverty level here in San Diego. And I appreciate your caveat, but let's talk for just a moment about what those people can do. I mean, they can't leave and quit their jobs, but what can someone do?
I think that's almost impossible to say. I'm not a social worker. I am. And everyone's life experience is different, and I don't have a solution for getting yourself out of poverty. I can speak purely from the vantage point of having hosted a personal finance show for 6 years, that the only ways to change your financial situation are to A, spend less money, or to B, make more. And for some families that are trapped in that cycle of poverty, they can't see any way to do that. And that's where the social safety net comes in, quite frankly, the government social safety net. And, I would hope that as a society, we would find a way to help those in need, who clearly, a lot of them are not able to find the joy in their lives because they're stuck in rundown jobs. They have to take 2-hour bus rides to get to and from the job that they do have. And, God help you if you need childcare along with that. It is an extraordinarily difficult situation, and one that I think should be intolerable in a country as wealthy as this one is. But it's when you are in a situation of abject poverty like that, there's just the advice that I can give just isn't applicable. I mean, it just isn't. I can't just tell them to go get another job because, again, what if they need childcare? What if they need transportation to and from something? They're making ends meet as best they can. And, I think it's up to a lot of the rest of us to help them in any way we can.
Do you have some thought of what someone could do for a family like that? This is not part of our scope that we were planning to talk about, but since we're here.
Well, I think because the government safety net has been so eroded over the years, I think donations to valid nonprofits, whether it's a church or a food bank or a homeless shelter, they need help. They need an extraordinary amount of help. We're coming out of the Great Recession, the worst economic climate since the Great Depression. And for a lot of Americans, it hasn't gotten better. For a lot of us, it has, and we're very fortunate in that. The job market has gotten better, the stock market has recovered, and then some. But for Americans living at the poverty level, Americans living at or below the median income in this country, which is $52,000 annually, and of course that depends on where you live, how far that takes you. It hasn't gotten any better, and so they are counting on food banks. They're counting on homeless shelters. In fact, I just this past week was out in San Bernardino in the eastern part of California, out in the desert near Palm Springs. But this is the opposite of Palm Springs. This is an extraordinarily poverty-stricken city. In fact, it's the second poorest city of its size outside of Detroit. And the story was these families who are living in cheap, rundown motels, including kids. And we profiled this woman and her child who are living in this seedy motel out there because they don't have any other options. And people were like, well, why don't they take that money and buy a house? Because it was like $300 a week for them. And people wrote in saying, why don't they use that $1,200 a month to go rent an apartment? Well, to rent an apartment, you have to have, a credit history. And a lot of these people don't. You also have to have first and last month's rent up front. And gathering that kind of money, gathering $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for families like this is impossible. So there is a lot of poverty. There's a lot of need out there. And I think the rest of us are obligated to do whatever we can to help out.
How do you think that that working with that story and those folks is part of your purpose?
Oh, wow. Good question. This is actually a struggle that I've had over the last 3 years in not being in my job, because the job that I had for 20 plus years allowed me to tell these stories to a wide national audience. And I have missed that. I just happened this past weekend to be backup hosting for NPR's All Things Considered. And that's why I had the opportunity to go do this story. So I think part of my life purpose while I was in radio was to tell those stories, to shine a light on the underprivileged in our society. And even for the non-underprivileged, part of my role for 6 years was to help people manage their money. And money is a topic that people have a lot of trouble with. It is really, really hard to manage money, to manage your finances. And people don't talk about it. People will talk about sex before they'll talk about money. And so I had this platform where I would answer calls and I would bring on experts to help people figure out their finances. So I think my role over the years, just as a reporter, has been to help shine a light on issues and problems problems and to talk to real people about what it's like to live in our society, to live in our world. And I haven't had that on a regular basis for the last 3 years. So that's been part of, my identity crisis that we talked about earlier. But I suppose my purpose over the last couple of years has been to write this book to help people through what is another really difficult thing to grapple with, which is not being satisfied with this thing that you do for 8+ hours a day. And a lot of people, as we've talked about, just feel stuck. And so I think my purpose the last couple of years has been to go through this as one of them and chronicle it and make it so that A, people know that they're not alone, and B, try to give them some sense of what to expect if they do this and how they can get through it.
And so where do you think that's going for you? Obviously hard to predict, but in the grander scheme of Tess's purpose for your lifetime, any ideas about that?
This is not something that I've actually talked a lot about recently, but I kind of have an idea, at least what I want to do for the next year or two. And I'll blog about it maybe in a month or so when I'm done with stuff for the book. But I had a life-changing trip to Peru earlier this year, in February of 2015. I went with my father, who is an orthopedic surgeon, and a team of doctors from Oregon to this teeny, teeny, tiny town in the middle of the Andes. Poverty like I've never seen. Children with no underwear, families coming down from 16,000 feet in the mountains where they have no running water, they don't have electricity, they have none of the modern conveniences of life. And this clinic was there to treat children who have bone deformities. And there are a lot of them because there's no such thing for them as prenatal care. There's no such thing for them as maternity care. So a lot of these children are born with a lot of issues. And I spent 5 days at this clinic watching the doctors do their work. But more than that, watching this community of indigenous people conduct their lives in a way that was astounding to me. They conducted themselves with no sense of privilege, no sense of what's the word I'm looking for?
Entitlement.
Thank you. Exactly the word I was looking for. No sense of entitlement. Some of them had to wait 24 hours because there were so many people who needed to be seen. Some of them had to wait 24 hours in the waiting room. Not a peep, not a complaint. And all their children with all their maladies, again, this word keeps coming up in my life, and I think it's such an important word. There was joy there. Now, yes, they're not aware of what they're missing. They don't know. They don't know anything outside their own world. But it struck me to the core. I cried every day, and I cried for 2 weeks when I got back. And so I have actually had a rough time even telling that story. And I haven't been able to yet. I have audio, I have photos, and I had fully intended to come back and, do a big production, for radio and for print. And it's been 6 months and I haven't been able to wrap my head around it. So I don't have that product yet, but it affected me so much that it makes me want to travel, and it makes me want to tell stories of people whose stories are not being told around the world. So in a few months, I am packing up and leaving Los Angeles, and I think I'm going to start in Southeast Asia, and I'm planning to, although I'm trying not to have a plan, but my rough outline is that I will spend a month in each country I go to, Vietnam, all around Southeast Asia, Indonesia, possibly India. Maybe I'll go, into Indochina. I don't know. I don't know exactly where I'm going to go, but I want to go spend time with people who are living a life that we don't know. that we don't understand, that we can't fathom. And I want to tell those stories because I think they're really important. And I think that there are threads of humanity that will run through them that we all need to hear. And so I'm committing journalism. I don't know what it's going to look like yet, but I think it's something that I feel like I have to do, and I can't explain that. I literally cannot explain why I'm being pulled to do that. I'm not a religious person. I do not believe in God, but I feel like there's something, and I'm not that person who says the universe is talking to me. I don't think the universe actually talks to anybody. That said, I have had signs over the last 3 years of all these things that I'm supposed to do, all these things that have come my way. And what I've learned to do is to listen to them. And so I have to listen to this, whatever it is that is pulling me to travel, to go tell stories that nobody else is telling. I hope it works. I have no idea if it will or not. I'm making it work financially because I'm selling my house. And instead of putting that into a retirement fund, as I would have told all of my listeners to do, I'm going to travel because I'm at this point in my life where that's my priority. So it's a little squishy, and it's very hard to explain to people, but that is what I think my life purpose is going to be over the next 12 months, 18 months, I don't know. And I could get there and hate it. And I'm leaving room for that. You know, I will stick it out as long as I can, even if I think I hate it. But if it's not working out, I'll come back and I'll figure out something else to do. I mean, that's been the best part of all this, is that I feel much more flexible in my life. And I've stopped judging myself, and I've stopped worrying about how other people are judging me. That's not to say I never do. I'm certainly worried about all the judgment that's going to come with a book I wrote, you know. But I'm much better about it than I was 3 years ago. And I would say that has been the most valuable part of this entire experience of leaping.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long answer.
I loved every minute of it, and I can't wait to talk to you, hopefully, when you come back from your travels.
Excellent.
I want to go back to something that you said about the people that you met when you went to Peru. I think your words were something like, they don't know any difference. You know, there's so much joy there, they don't know any difference, or something like that. They don't know what they're missing. And, you know, it brings the thought, you know, maybe it's us that we don't know what we're missing. You know, like what an amazing journey that you're going to have, seeing joy in small spaces without modern comfort, and a great realization is to be had, I think.
I think so too. And that was really what I took away from it. And, you know, it's so hard to talk about something like that, because what you don't want to do is say, oh, hey, poverty is great. You know, it's great not to have running water. It's great not to have modern conveniences. That's not the case. That's not what I'm saying. And, you know, I think that lives can be improved across the world. And I think everyone should have the right to clean water and running water. But I guess what just struck me was their ability to have joy without all of those things. And I want to explore what that is, why that is, and why we as a society, you know, not just in America, but in the West, why we've gotten so accustomed to our modern conveniences that when we don't have them, we are totally lost. You know, this whole idea that you can't go on a vacation without checking your email, that's absurd.
Crazy,
Something
isn't it?
went really, really wrong a long time ago, and we've just accepted it. You know, I don't. Did you see the story about Amazon in the New York Times in early August? It was this story about the employees there. They talked to 100+ employees, and it's a work culture that I think is not unusual, but where people are expected to answer their phones 24/7, where people are expected to they had a woman who had cancer and came back from the cancer and was told by her boss that, well, she had been away for a while, so she wasn't really worth it anymore. I mean, what is that?
Hello.
Yes. And boy, there was another story recently about this concoction called Soylent that I read this story as well, that everybody in Silicon Valley apparently is drinking now. And it's like this protein shake, but it's supposedly even better than that. It gives you more vitamins. And the reason they created it was for all these people in Silicon Valley who don't want to take 10 minutes to eat a meal. That's wrong. I don't understand that. I don't understand why we celebrate that. That's bizarre. That you cannot take one of the greatest pleasures in life, which is to sit down and eat something good for you, a peach, for 10 minutes, that we are so wrapped up in creating the newest app or the newest website or whatever, or probably the newest way to get people to buy stuff, that we don't take the simple pleasures in life. And I don't like it. I think we are on a really, really wrong path. And it's funny because it's not something that I guess I always knew that, but it's not something I ever really cared about or paid attention to. But now that I've had time to sit back and think about my career and think about my priorities in life, I just think a lot of those people are going to get to their 40s, their 50s, their 60s and say, what the hell was I doing? Because there's way, way, way more to life than working so hard that you have to drink Soylent, which is named, by the way, after Soylent Green. Right? Mm-hmm. We know what that was. Soylent Green was people. I mean, it's gross, right? But I don't know. I keep seeing all these stories of how American companies are treating their workers, how much American companies are asking of their workers, and it's all in the service of everybody making more money, and that's all in the service of getting more people to buy more stuff. And I've just come to the point where I'm really tired of that. I'm really tired of that. And I want to see how other societies work without that. I think it's invading. I think it's invading everywhere, even places where you never would have thought it would. But I don't think people are happier because of it. In fact, I know people aren't. I mean, you see the same statistics that I do. People aren't happy.
Of course.
All these modern conveniences, all this stuff, it doesn't make us happier. So let's try. I just want to see how people do without.
I think we're starting to see. I totally agree with everything that you're saying, and having visited Google and seeing all the things that they have on site there. You can do your laundry. You can go in a pod to take a nap for 20 minutes. You can get a massage. You can eat healthy food. You can eat whatever the number of restaurants that they have on site now there. So and they have a sculpture garden and an on-site herb garden, vegetable garden there.
Celebrated. All of this is
right.
Like people say that Google is awesome because it has all of this. I now would say the opposite. I think that is toxic. That you are expecting so much of people that you don't want them to leave to pick up their dry cleaning. Mm-hmm. What? Are you kidding me? That's why is that a good thing? Why do we say that is a good thing? We say it's a good thing because we worship capitalism. And I'm not a communist, but I think that we have gone off the rails in how we worship and celebrate this kind of work ethic. It's gross.
Well, let's talk about the things that that we're starting to see, I think we're starting to see a shift in some of those things. Like we're seeing, as you were talking about, all of these things lining up so that we can sell more things. We're starting to see books like The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, staying in the bestseller list, where people are starting to think about, tiny houses and downsizing. We're starting to see people thinking about growing their own food and changing, more people working from home and doing all their own things. So do you think that those are signs of what the country's going to look like in the future? Or are we going to have two different houses where there's part of our culture working all the time at places like Google and the rest of us working from home? Or what's your prediction?
Oh boy, I don't have a crystal ball.
Oh, come on. No crystal ball over there?
I never would have imagined that we would get to the point that we're at right now. That said, I do think that there is a reevaluation going on. That, first of all, there is a generation, again, these millennials, I do think that they have put a spotlight on the idea that work is not their lives. They have started to prompt change within the workplace, and I think that's all for the good. I also think that people are starting to realize what we've done to the planet. I think people are starting to realize what we've done to ourselves in terms of stress, in terms of these kinds of expectations that we've been talking about. And I guess what I hope is that my book and others like it will show people that they can do it differently. I mean, that's the thing. All these people, I love the movement of people growing their own vegetable gardens, right? And I think some of that happened because of Michael Pollan, because of Mark Bittman, people saying, look, you can do this, and maybe your government doesn't want you doing it in your front yard, but do it anyway and see if you can make change, see if you can change the law. So if people start demanding more from their employers, if people start saying, you know what, I don't deserve what you're doing, what you're saying. I deserve better than that. And I have options. And there are more options now. A lot of it because of technology. If people start pushing back against tradition, against expectation, I think the future might look different. I think it might. And quitting is one way to do that. There are all kinds of ways. I certainly hope the world looks different. I don't know that it will, but I think you're right. I think we are on a track where, at the very least, people are starting to ask the question.
I think you're definitely onto something with the millennials. I will give a shout out to my intern Heaven, who is 21 and works with me on this show, and she seems to certainly, at least this far in her life, have her priorities set exactly as you described them. And, we see many more people having daily practices related to mindfulness and the big movement in mindfulness-based stress reduction. I recently had a conversation with Susan Piver and Christopher Carter about those things. So I choose to be hopeful about those things. With that said, do you have a daily practice?
Nope.
I bet that when you're headed into all these countries, I bet you'll have one then.
Maybe, and I think that works for a lot of people. It just doesn't for me. I've tried having that that quiet time in the morning, and I don't know, it doesn't do anything for me. I suppose. I try to take a long walk every day, and a brisk one at that, and maybe, I don't know, maybe that's
that sounds like a practice to me.
I guess it is. I never really thought of it like that, and there are some days when I can't do that, but I guess I do. Especially in the last 3 years, I have set aside time that's just for me, and I don't know that I did that before. And I wouldn't really call it, I don't know that it was mindfulness, but just, I guess, quiet. And just a space to try to to get rid of the noise.
And what do you do during that quiet time?
Well, no, I mean, I think that's, again, I don't do the quiet time. I go for a walk. And I don't do anything but listen to music. Which that's actually a change for me because I used to listen to news. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I never listened to anything but news. And it's not like I listen to classical music or anything. I can't believe I'm going to admit this. I
can't wait for this. I love these times.
I like pop music. I like top 40. So don't tell anybody.
I won't tell a soul except for the thousands of people that listen to this show, I promise. But so you're out there listening to Nicki Minaj and Taylor Swift, and they keep your blood pumping.
They do, and they make me smile. And I sing along, and it keeps my pace up, and so you know, I'm not listening to birds chirping or, you know, fountain water. I'm listening to upbeat stuff, and
here we are back to those millennials again. There's
and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel better about my day, and it gets me out of my own head, especially because I tend to listen. I have a I can't believe I'm telling you all this. I have a playlist of maybe 250 songs, and that's all I listen to. I don't even listen to top 40 radio. Like I hear something that catches my ear, and I put it on this playlist, and then I just listen to this playlist. So,
well, you hear it somewhere. Do you listen to Pandora or?
No, I will usually. How do I find those songs?
In your car, maybe.
Yeah, maybe sometimes I hear it on my car, or people will talk about it, or people will, like, somebody will post. Maybe somebody will post a video on Facebook. Like that's how that's the first time I ever heard "Shake It Off" from Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it on Facebook, and I was like, oh my God, that song is great, and I put it on my playlist. So I will walk around for like an hour, and it'll be a brisk walk, and I'll be listening to this, you know, upbeat music, and I guess that would be my almost daily practice, and I never thought about it that way.
Well, she has a practice, folks. I think she does. So let's talk about money, since you are the money girl, or were the money girl. Do you think about money for yourself? Do you make more or less money now that you're doing what you're doing today? And does it matter? Have your values changed? I think you inferred that they have a bit because you're heading off on this worldwide trip.
Very personal question. No, but not really, because I talk about it in the book.
I heard somewhere that people don't like to talk about money. They'd rather talk about sex.
Yeah, but I'm not going to talk about that. So let's talk about money. No, so I was highly compensated. I was very, very fortunate in the last job, the one that I quit. And in the first year after I left, I made a third of that. The second year, I made about 2/3. So I was making 2/3 of my old salary.
Pretty
on
good.
My own. Yes. I will say that before I took my leap, while we did not have a lot of money in the bank, although we had retirement accounts, my husband had a full-time job for which he was compensated enough that we didn't have to worry about the mortgage. So I didn't really have to worry about it, but our lifestyle did change fairly significantly. You know, we used to go on fancy trips abroad, and we would go out to dinner a lot, and, you know, I would buy things for my house and for my closet, and I stopped doing a lot of that.
That stuff that you were talking about.
And now I've actually gotten to the point where I want most of my stuff to just go away. So I've been having a garage sale recently. So it forced me to get a more simplified life, and I love that. That's one of the things I'm most grateful for out of all of this. I realized I didn't need to keep chasing money. You know, money is good. I would never say that money is bad. But I think a lot of us, you know, it's that whole keeping up with the Joneses thing, and the whole keeping up with your parents and keeping up with your friends, and it's silly. it's really silly. And it's a never-ending cycle because you can keep getting raises and promotions, and most of us, studies show this, will just keep spending to the limit of what we have.
Mm-hmm.
So
and always feel like there's not enough.
Always feel like there's not enough. Exactly. I mean, they've done studies of multimillionaires who feel like they don't have enough because there are billionaires out there. I mean, that's just weird. That's wrong. That is wrong-headed.
You heard it here.
Right
wrong-headed.
So anyway, I've been very fortunate that I've had plenty of work as a freelancer, as a backup host. I got a very generous book deal, so that has all come into play in terms of my own income. Now, once the book payments stop in about 6 months from the advance, I'm going to have to figure out, how it's going to work, and I'm going to have to figure that out while I'm traveling the globe. But I guess what this has all done for me is to make me realize that I can live on a lot less than what I thought, and B, I've learned how resourceful I can be and how I can find myself new ways to find work. And again, it gets back to that notion of figuring out how to use the skills you have in a different way. And there's an art to that. But we've all evolved to be able to figure things out. That's why we have a human brain. And you just have to trust yourself that you will figure it out and that you will find solutions. And I'm not saying that it's all sunshine and unicorns. It's not. It's very difficult. But you have it within you. I truly believe that.
Me too.
Yay!
Me too.
Yay, humanity!
Have you ever encountered resistance to where you're headed and the work that you're doing now from friends or family or coworkers?
Only when I quit. I gave a speech a couple of years ago that was titled, "What the hell are you doing?" And that's because several friends asked me that when I announced that I was leaving Marketplace. That said, it's not that they weren't supporting me. I mean, I've received nothing but support from my family, from friends, from fans, from the radio. I think people miss me on the radio, and I really miss my audience. But everyone seems to understand. When you talk about how it's just something that you felt you had to do, and you did it. The reaction from most people is, "Wow, you are brave." And I didn't believe that for a long time. I thought I was an idiot. But now I believe I really was brave, and I am brave. And the next thing people say is, "I wish I could." And so my fondest hope from this book, if even one person is able to take that next step, because they read about my experience and the experience of so many others who've done it, if they are able to leave a situation that is just not good for them for whatever reason, it doesn't have to be toxic. You don't have to hate it. In fact, think about it before you hate it. Think about it before you get angry, because that's not a place you want to be in to make decisions. So if it can help just one person make that decision and bring them a better life for themselves on this earth where we are for such a short time, then I've done my job.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for that. May I ask you a lightning round of short answer yes or no questions?
Okay.
Do you think passion and purpose are the same things?
No.
Do you think everybody has a life purpose?
Yes.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how important is following your joy and igniting your life purpose?
9.
Did you ever quit your job to follow your purpose? And do you think somebody needs to quit?
Yes.
Let's see. I think we've talked about that before.
Hour.
That's right. What brings you great joy?
Learning something new.
If you unexpectedly amassed a good-sized fortune, what would you do differently?
I would travel the world and never be in one place for a long time.
Okay. And just in getting ready to close, what should listeners learn from your life?
That you don't have to live your life the way you think you should, the way you've been taught, the way you think others expect of you, the way you've expected of yourself. You can change it up, and it'll be okay. And you will find a whole new world opening up for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So before we close today, tell us where we can find your book and where we can find more information about you.
All right, you can hello. The radio gal can't talk. You can find more information at tessvigeland.com. That's Vigeland. I'm also all over social media. You can friend me on Facebook. I love meeting new people. Go ahead and send a friend request. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I've been teaching myself photography, so you can go take a look at that. And the book will be available at every retailer out there. You can visit Barnes & Noble if you'd like. They're going to have it on some tables at the front. And certainly on Amazon and any other online bookseller.
And just tell us one more time, the name of your wonderful book is?
Leap, Leaving a Job with No Plan B to Find the Career and Life You Really Want.
Tess, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation and for your openness and candor in our conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Angie. It's been entirely my pleasure.
Oh, and mine as well.
Quit your job.
You've been listening to the Life Purpose Advisor podcast. I'm Angie Swartz here today with Tess Vigeland talking about her book Leap and the rest of her title, which she just told you. If you'd like to find your life purpose, more information about that, you can come talk to me at lifepurposeadvisor.com, and we'll see you next time.